Sorry, folks, there's 2 glasses of Leftfoot Charlie white wine involved here.
We had to get him here somehow. So, Randy, welcome to your Lifetime Achievement Ceremony. I'm so happy you could make it, and Lynn, thank you for being in cahoots on all this. So, in case you're not aware, we are celebrating this fellow here, Randy Scott, who has done an amazing achievement. This man has been working in the library since the early 70s, and he has amassed the world's largest public collection of comic books. So I'm just going to let this linger here for a little bit. I want to let this sink in. This is quite an achievement, and we're putting this together for you today, Randy, because I think that you deserve to be recognized. And this doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't just happen during work hours either. So I've known Randy for the past decade or so, since I've moved to Michigan with my lovely wife, and we started working here. And the first thing I did when I came to campus was go to special collections, because it is infamous in the comics industry. Everybody knows about this, and whether or not people on campus or in East Lansing know about it, the people in the comics industry know about it. And I told Randy when I got here, this is going to be a secret that I'm going to blow out of the water. I want everybody to know about this collection. And Randy spends not just working hours, not just his 60-hour work weeks, which he's cut back to 40-hour work weeks at 71 and a half years old, if I'm not mistaken. But I want to tell you a story about Randy. So I was out on a date night with my wife at the movie a few years back, and we get out of the movie, and we're walking down the aisle, and I see Randy and Lynn, and I say to my wife, "Oh, look, there's Randy and Lynn. Oh, hi." And I walk up, and I see Randy, and he's like this. And I get a little closer, and I say, "Randy, are you cataloging?" And he says, "Well, yeah, what else am I going to do?" And I said, "Enjoy your date night with your wife." And I said, "Randy, God bless you for doing this. And Lynn, God bless you for putting up with him." Because this is what makes it happen. In fact, I visited Lynn just the other day and got a glimpse of their dining room table. I think this might be its natural state. And I've assembled a few people here today to share in this recognition and say a few words to you. So I wanted to introduce a colleague of mine, Zach Cruzy, who is a PhD candidate in the English department and very good friend of mine and tremendous colleague who helps put on the Michigan State University Comics Forum. So if you won't mind, join me in welcoming Zach Cruzy.
Hi, gang. I'm Zach, as it so conveniently says up there. Yeah, I'm a PhD candidate in English, but my field at large, I do comic studies, right? That's why I'm here, is to do comic studies. And in fact, the reason that I came here is because for three people and 3 reasons. One, Ryan and I had been friends for a long time through comics conventions and industry stuff. We had known each other from shows. 2, another colleague and friend of mine, Gary Hoppenstand, who's not here tonight, but was an early sort of participant in comic studies. And also because of the collection. And I knew what the collection was. I knew what it was before anybody in my peer group knew what it was. I knew what it was when maybe you didn't have to know what it was, if that makes any kind of sense, before comic studies became what it's starting to be. So there's on the card that says my talk is called something like Contextualizing the Collection. And when Ryan asked me for a title, he gave me that one. I said, that's fine. But then I thought about it later. I was like, maybe the subtitle for this is, oh, right, I know him. And I say that because whenever I talk about the collection or I talk about what I do here at MSU with people, and I ask if they're familiar with it, and I say that we have the largest collection. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't, but more often than not, if I drop Randy's name, they go, "Oh, right, Randy! I remember Randy. Yeah, sure, we talked about something in the 80s, and he helped me catalog this whole thing for some sort of so-and-so's obscure Western Dell comics 35 years ago, and he got them all and like completed a project for me." And in fact, I just had that conversation with a colleague, a friend of mine, Robin Snyder. If you don't know who Robin is Steve Ditko's co-publisher, but has been publishing Steve's comics for 30 years, but has been working in and around comics for 5-6 decades, something like that, as an editor, as a writer, as a historian, as a contributor. And I was recently talking to Robin about this very thing. He said, "Oh yes, I remember Randy. He helped me do this. He helped me complete a project," which speaks to something that this collection, what Randy's work has done, not just for the library, but for comics at large, right? Part of the reason that we understand and have access to the things that we have access to is because of the collection that's been amassed here. And you cannot understate that. As another example of this, so when I first got here, Ryan set up a tour with me, with Randy, or set up a tour for me with Randy, and we're walking down through the stacks in the collection, and he pulled out one of the strangest, most beautiful things I'd ever seen in my entire life. He pulled out this hand-bound book of comic strips that someone had donated, right? There's a whole bunch of these down there, where and maybe I shouldn't say crazy person, but some crazy person took the time to, someone took the time to cut out all of these strips and carefully glue them onto cardstock and then make a homemade book, like an Etsy project, but for like comics archive stuff, right? And because that thing exists, publishers like IDW can come here and borrow those collections and reprint comics that would never see the light of day because the original art is gone, because the strips are gone, because people didn't save those newspapers, except here. And there's something really profoundly important about that. My work is not possible without the things that have been done here. And every time I talk about Randy or I hear things about Randy, I always hear strange and bizarre legends about Randy. And maybe they're not so strange and bizarre, but like when someone told me that you had worked with the weatherman, I was like, Randy was with the weatherman? Randy? Randy Scott, the nicest man on the planet? And they said, yes. Yeah, no, not the meteorologist. So then my mind started to go to bizarre places. Like, is Randy Trash Man from Spain's comics? Maybe Randy is. Maybe that's how he gets around and collects these things. He turns into an old copy of the East Village Other and floats away, and then shows up where the comics are, gathers them, and brings them home, right? Or maybe part of the reason Randy wasn't on trial in 1968 is because he spotted some underground comics that he had to go grab just before they showed up at the Democratic Convention, right? So all that to say is that I'm allowed to do what I do because of the things because I stand on the shoulders of giants and people that came before me, and because of the care and thought that went into taking care of this medium and not just treating it as something throwaway and not treating it as something that is unworthy of scholarly or intellectual attention. That doesn't happen without librarians. It doesn't happen without public scholars, and it doesn't happen without people who can straddle that line and do both and carry on real, thoughtful conversations with both of those parties. And Randy, I believe, has done that, and because he's done that, I've found a home and success and an intellectual sort of, and been able to make an intellectual and emotional foundation for my work. And I can't thank him enough for that. So those are my thoughts, but thank you all, and thank you, Randy.
I owe you a letter of recommendation.
Yeah. I didn't want to embarrass you in front of everyone, but here we are.
Maybe you'll get it now, Zach. Thank you, Zach, for coming up and saying some words. And I'd like to introduce our next guest, Joe Salem, the university librarian. Let's give him a hand.
Well, thank you all. I see Randy looking at the schedule because he's thinking if he's speaking, boy, we got a long night ahead of us. I thank both Zach and Ryan for really compelling words about Randy and what he's built and its impact on their work. I may be the only librarian speaking. I don't know everyone else in the video, except for Randy if he decides to speak. So I really want to focus my remarks on Randy's career and his contributions in the context of our shared profession and what it's meant, not just for comics. And when I say not just, I don't mean that to be dismissive, but really Randy's work has had a much larger impact on our profession. And sorry to say to anyone who's not happy about that, it's probably one of the reasons I'm in the profession that I'm in, and I got to have this amazing job, and I am right in front of you right now. So Randy started, according to the dates that I got from our HR department, he started in 1978. That's probably his librarian position, and then moved into special collections in 1991. And I'm not just throwing dates out for just because I have them. That's pretty significant because it kind of gives you a sense of how long Randy was doing his work in other areas of the library. And we were thinking about comics. They were in special collections, but he was cataloging them, and we're thinking about them from that frame. It's not until 1991 that we're really thinking, okay, this is a special collection, and that's really the big contribution and the way I want you and all of us to think about Randy's work and how important it is, because he helped to open up what we think about in special collections. He had been acquiring and accepting donations for the comics collection during that interim period. He was transferring work to special collections, but again, his expertise was in the description of those materials. It was originally part of the Russell B. Nye collection. You probably see that in some of our materials. That was a popular culture collection. And that was already kind of a step forward. I'm not going to lecture you about all this, but it's so important what Randy's done here. Because a step forward, it was already a big deal that libraries were thinking about popular culture in the 70s. And the Russell B. Nye collection is one of the most significant ones in the country. It's significant here. Nye was a very groundbreaking popular culture theorist and scholar. So it was a big deal. That collection was a big deal. Comics were a part of that. And if you could think about Randy Scott as a junior librarian, as a young career librarian, saying, okay, let's just build on top of that. That's pretty remarkable, right? And then to persist over all that time, he just kept building on that original donation, and that's why we have the collection that we do, building he did. It started primarily U.S. only. Mid-'90s, it became European, and then it's truly global now. So it reflects MSU's land grant and global position. It's still primarily U.S., but it really has grown its scope, which is really important from the other part of all of this, thinking about comics as reflecting the overall scholarly community at the university. So it's not just this niche thing, but really thinking, okay, MSU is a global institution. We have strengths in African studies. We're going to have comics that are strong in African studies. So thinking about comics as part of the curriculum and part of supporting research and scholarship. It's hard to talk about Randy without getting into the collection, and plenty of you have, and you will in the video, I'm sure. But consider it's a public collection, truly global in scope, and it's measured in the thousands of volumes for comics. Hundreds of thousands. Think about that for a minute. 350,000, 500, whatever the crazy number is, it doesn't matter because none of us can read all that in our lifetimes. And it's a public collection. Many of us will spend our careers or lives building collections, sharing our passion in one way. I have a record collection I'm happy with, but it's not public. It's not the life that I've lived to share it with the public around us. That's a librarian thing, but it's such an important thing to build that, to have it be part of our legacy. And it's one of those things that when I think about what we do as our profession, I'm really proud of, that you can spend a whole life to build something that's not just yours, but it's part of the whole community. And think about the time, he's truly an originator, really, of all comics collections in academia. As an originator, Randy found himself not really with all the tools that are at your disposal. So he literally developed a Library of Congress classification scheme to organize comics. That's really nerdy librarian stuff, but it's amazing, actually. Okay, I don't know how to organize this. We have some principles. I'm going to develop this. It's still in use for anyone who has collections of comics anywhere. So he's developed a standard. How do you store 300,000 comics, and how do you care for that? Randy developed all of that, and in true originator and contributor fashion, put that out there into the world. So in the, I'm not going to get the publication date right. Bad librarians, cite your sources. He wrote the textbook on this and shared it with everyone, and it is the textbook. We don't have a whole lot of these in our profession, but anyone who wants to build a comics collection is going to grab Randy's book. It's called Comics Librarianship, a Handbook, so we could work on titles, Randy, but it is the core textbook, and it's one of these things that even, and you'll see in a minute why this matters so much to me personally, even going through library school when I did, it was one of these textbooks I got to know about, even though I never had a cool job like Randy's job. So I can't really adequately express the impact of Randy's work and the very notion of special collections. Even within his lifetime, think about what special collections meant. It meant rare, expensive books from the canon in very closed environments, right? Popular culture was a step forward. Okay, that was a stretch for some places. Think about opening it up to comics. Comic books in a special collections library. Students might want to use that. That's crazy. People were going to want to use this stuff. Hundreds of thousands of comics in a special collections library. That's insane. And now special collections are truly special. They reflect the needs and the priorities of the institution, but they're unique for a lot of institutions, and we've opened up what that means greatly. So it's not just six-figure volumes for one person's area of study, and they can really reflect a lot of different areas of study. And Randy, you're part of a generation, and you make contributions that really open that up in meaningful ways. It's not easy to do that. I can guarantee you, and I haven't really talked with Randy about that, he smuggled stuff into this library, I'm sure. I'm sure he fought with people about getting his work done. I'm sure you had to count on the generosity of others for donations. He didn't even have an acquisitions budget up until the last decade or so. We weren't buying comics, we were getting them donated. It was this great thing that he was building without a lot of institutional support. And now we have institutional support. It's part of our identity. It's going to continue to be part of our identity. This is not a retirement party, but it's something I want to publicly commit. I support what you're doing, and it'll be something I support while you're here, and dare I say, after you decide to retire. And then finally, I want to personally thank Randy for his contributions to our profession. When I was in college years ago, I got to know of the Bowling Green State University Popular Culture collection first. That was my first foray into thinking, well, libraries might be cool. That might be a gig. And Randy actually influenced that in complicated librarian ways that I won't get into, but through kind of shared agreements about what I'll collect in this area, you collect in that. And then I got a little bit more interested in, well, what is this popular culture? What does this look like in libraries? And then I got to know, even then, from Ohio, about the MSU Comic Art Collection and realized, okay, this might be the profession for me. I never held a job as cool as being the comic librarian, but I truly don't know that I would have become a librarian if not for work like Randy's and for building collections where the collections look like and they mean something to people who held those types of things. I didn't grow up with rare books in my house. I grew up with comic books in my hand. And so to know that they mattered to the institution, that people would do scholarship and care about what that experience was like, really meant a lot to me. And I thought, well, that might be a good gig. So tonight I thank you and I congratulate you on a career of distinction and impact. And I hope everyone else does as well.
Joe, thank you very much. And I wanted to take a moment just to recognize and thank you for making a public statement about the importance of the collection and the longevity of the collection and your commitment to it. Thank you so much. It means a lot to all of us in this room. Randy I'm glad Joe said something briefly about this not being a retirement ceremony. The reason we're having this right now is because I had a conversation with your lovely wife, and I said, so I've been talking to Randy ever since I got here, trying to get a retirement date out of him. Not to get him to leave, but just to understand what his interests are and what his trajectory looks like at MSU. So Lynn, do you have any inside information on this? And she said, he won't tell me either. And so I said, I really want to recognize Randy for the work that he's done. I think it's such a powerful life's work that deserves to be celebrated. And would you like to do that now or when he retires? And she said, let's do that now. And so I said, okay, and started working immediately on getting some testimonials from a number of different people. And I think you might recognize a few of these folks. So why don't I start up this video right now? All right, so we've got a couple more things to do. One, typically for the following year's Comics Forum, I don't mention who we have coming until the end of the current Comics Forum. But I'd like to talk to you about who we've got coming. You might know of this gal. Her name is Emile Ferris, and she did this little book that's been winning a ton of awards. She practically swept the Eisners in 2018, winning the Best Graphic Novel, Best Artist Writer, Best Colorist. She is coming next year, and at the risk of sounding like a promotion for next year's Comics Forum, the reason I'm telling you about this is because I wanted to showcase next year's artwork right now. Jill did this piece, obviously based on Randy, and her signature crosshatch style. And I showed this to Lynn the other day, and my favorite comment from her that day was, she really captured his eyebrows. So I've actually got a postcard that I will hand to you, Randy. The rest of these will come out at the end of the day on Saturday. So I've got this to hand to you in a moment. And this is also the point where I wanted to bring you up, if you don't mind, coming up here for a moment. Randy.
I was just getting comfortable.
So first of all, here's your postcard. You can catalog that. And next, I have something that I wanted to present to you. Here is, I'll let you open this. And in case you can't see the box, this is what's inside it.
It's a lifetime achievement ceremony. Wow. And it's, you can use it to hold a comic book? You read it. Oh, you've got it up there.
We've got it up
Everybody can
here.
read it, yeah.
And it says, for your incomparable achievement of amassing the largest public collection of comic books in the world, housed in Michigan State University Main Library Special Collections, the MSU Comics Forum and Comic Studies program hereby honors your decades of dedication, perseverance, and singular vision. Your commitment to archiving and accessibility is second to none. The comic scholar community is forever in your debt, and your life's work will affect the trajectory of the course of study for generations to come. So I wanted you to have something to let you know that, gosh darn it, we sure appreciate you. So thank you for all your work.
Is invited to come to Special Collections and read comics at no charge.
He doesn't make that offer very often. So I actually have one thing I wanted to mention in closing, and Zach, I'm going to try to make it through this. If I don't, I might have to call you up here. But I wanted to read you some words from the foreword to Randy's book. This is written by Sandy Berman, and this is for the Bowker-Ulrich Serials Librarianship Award, which Randy was being nominated for way back in 1988. And it says, Mr. Scott not only meets but transcends all three criteria for the award: contributions to serials literature, serials research, and enhancing access to serials. Quite simply, though accurately, he is the foremost library authority and advocate for that special serials category, comic books. As his enclosed vita and sample publications attest, Mr. Scott has single-handedly pioneered in creating an appreciation for comics among his colleagues, as well as producing the basic tools and guides for both collecting and organizing comic book collections. In this otherwise neglected but significant field, he has no peer. Speaking personally, as an editor and collaborator, I have found Mr. Scott to be an exceptionally dedicated, knowledgeable, responsive, and creative professional. He truly likes what he does. He does it splendidly and thinks it important to do so. The Bowker-Ulrich Award would represent an overdue recognition of his vital work and a real encouragement to continue it. And the reason I wanted to read this to you is because this was written decades ago, and he's talking about Randy's knowledge, his responsiveness, his communication, and his dedication to this field, and that remains unchanged today. So let's give Randy a round of applause.
Someday I will retire, so get your resume ready.
You just have to let me know when that happens, and I'll get to work on another one of these things. In the meantime, so those are closing remarks, and I wanted to open up the floor. There are some microphones around the room, just in case anybody here in attendance wanted to say anything to Randy publicly.
One of the reasons I came to MSU was because of the comics collection. Yeah. Because it was like, I was looking at a lot of different universities. And so, it's like, the fact that you had so many was just like so impressive. It's like,
I've been at MSU Libraries just about as long as Randy, and he was a general cataloger when I first met him years ago, and he sat in this room with all the other catalogers and just about half of the first floor, and they sat at these green desks. This was before the days of employee comfort, so they were just the same awful green desks, and it was kind of just a soulless, colorless thing. And Randy, I remember walking through many times and seeing this, and I'm the only one who would probably know about this. He built this edifice or structure out of Tinker Toys, multicolored, and it rose up from his desk and took almost the entire top of the desk. So I always wondered how he actually did his work. And the student employees call him the Tinker Toy guy. I'm sure he never knew that either. But I think it speaks to Randy, the fact that he was thumbing his nose at the library administration, and it showed that he had this soul that was defying everything around him, and it was colorful in that way. The other thing to know too is that I worked in the G. Robert Vincent Voice Library, and I remember Randy was cataloging, and he was allowed to catalog our stuff. And the Voice Library is a collection of sound recordings, about 100,000 hours, which in itself is a special collection, a very unusual thing. So Randy was allowed at one point in time to spend 2 hours per week on the Voice Library, and then I think at that point he was allowed to do some comic books. And it took him years to get to special collections. And they gave him a little time down there, but there was always, well, he should be up there doing the books and the things we get. So when he actually finally got physically down in special collections at some point in time, it was a huge deal. Randy and I are what I would call hallway friends. So we've been walking by each other for all of these years, and I'd be in special collection, I'd see him, and we'd stop in the hallway and talk. And one day I said to him, we met again in the hallway, and I said, Randy, do you think that 30 years from now, you and I will be stopping to say hello in the hallway? And we both laughed. Well, Randy, here we are.
I think you said 20 years first time.
Probably. I couldn't believe 30.
Hi, Dad. Your father-in-law passed me a note on the way out the door today to read. He wanted to make sure this was read. Randy Scott is a man of many talents. He painstakingly produced a very important, immense library collection which is highly respected, recognized, and used all over the world. From my perspective, he also helped produce a family of which I am very proud. Randy Scott, a son-in-law to be much admired and loved. And I just like to say for myself that often when you hear stories of people who have done something great, there was a balance where they neglected something and often their family. But Dad was always there. Every family dinner, every holiday, every piano recital, every play. All the jokes about cataloging in every spare moment are true. But he drew the line when it came to spending time with his family, and we love him so much for that.
I know Randy from church. Haven't known him a long time, but he's always there at church. He's always up there in the choir. Once a month he has music in his home where he's got a music room with a beautiful grand piano. He plays many instruments. And from what I know of Randy, not only is he very dedicated, but when he's dedicated, he's really good at it.
Hello, Mr. Scott. So I know Mr. Scott, but he doesn't know me. I first saw him like 2 years ago for a tour during Ryan Claytor's first level comics class, and ever since that, like I was able to like remember your face. Like you had that very, I could just remember your face, and so you know, he doesn't exactly know me, but you know things like that take time. But if you're looking for, you know, I don't know, like a, you know, an undergraduate successor, you know, I'm here.
I'm Ned Jackson, and I'm also mostly somebody who knows Randy from church, but as everybody here knows, Randy is multi-talented, and it's been a great pleasure singing next to him for many years now because I can't read music as fast as he can. I can't find the notes as fast as he can, but because he's there, it's fun for everybody, and it's especially fun for me. And it's what's wonderful about this man is that he's so incredibly talented, and sometimes really talented people get impatient with people who are less competent than them. But he is the most welcoming person that I practically know in the world in that way. And because of that, his talents, you feel as though you inherit some of them just by being in his sphere. So thank you, Randy.
I've been here also almost as long as John and Randy. and I've been down in special collections now since 2009. I trained as a medical librarian. We have a different take on service in that we have doctors who need things immediately, so we're more used to just getting things for people as opposed to teaching people how to use the library. And while Randy does help people learn how to use the library, I have always been amazed and appreciative of the way he can go above and beyond to help somebody get a project done, get a scan of something they might need for a book. The one thing I remember fondly of late was I went to school at Heidelberg College, now University in Ohio, and one of the faculty there wrote her thesis dissertation on Wonder Woman, but she had a student who was working on a project and had sent an email out, and then Randy said, maybe you'd like to take care of this because it says Heidelberg on it. Well, I'm not real great at navigating the microfilm and the microfiche, especially with our comics, but he got it out for me and got it started, and the student got her paper done and got a passing grade. So I find that type of service is often lacking in many areas of libraries in general, but Randy is the epitome of going above and beyond to help the patrons' needs.
Hello, Randy. I just wanted to come up and thank you from the kids' table for, I guess, existing as this ultra cool real adult that just does things with comics and exists and does those things to kind of prove to people like me that were born 2 days ago that you can grow up and do these things and keep your passion alive and not have to like abandon it for academia or something you really don't care about. Like, I was there 2 years ago for a tour of the comics collection, but in my drawing class, because Claytor is always running that comic studies hustle. And I remember going down into the basement and seeing this like royal tomb of comic books from everywhere that exists, and thinking, wow, I don't have to leave this behind in middle school. That's fantastic. And now I'm in the comic studies minor, which is wild. And I also wanted to thank you for showing support to us in comic studies and bopping into Hollow Mountain every semester to dish out some gold doubloons and give us that first kind of like opportunity to show our comics off to the world and be considered like part of this community that exists. I just think you're super cool.
I'm not sure anybody can top that. So with that said, I'd like to direct everybody to the refreshment table where there is a massive cake with the head of Randy on it. So maybe we can have Randy go back there first and make the first cut, and then we can all follow. How about that? Thank you all for coming out, and thank you, Randy, for everything that you do.